Welcome to the deep dive. You've shared some really interesting stuff with us, and today we're plunging into a recent report on the global cocoa peat market.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area.
It really is. And, before anyone thinks this is just about gardening, this market really touches on some big global issues: sustainability, agriculture, even global economics.
Exactly. And just for anyone maybe not familiar, cocoa peat's sometimes called coir pith, basically a growing medium made from coconut husks.
Right.
And what's really interesting is how it's becoming a major alternative to traditional soil.
Absolutely. So our mission here, our goal in this deep dive is to really pull apart this report, get the key insights on, where the cocoa peat market is now and where it's headed.
Sort of a shortcut to understanding this surprisingly big industry.
Exactly. Okay, let's get into it. So the report you sent, it hits us right away with some pretty impressive numbers on the market size and growth.
Yeah, the scale is definitely the first thing that jumps out. The projection for 2025 is, let me check, USD 2,651.5 million globally.
2.6 billion, basically.
Okay. But the growth forecast, that's where it gets even more interesting,
Right. By 2033, it's projected to climb quite a bit, USD 317.5 million.
which works out to a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate of 5.00% between 2025 and 2033.
5%. That's solid growth year on year. And the report, it highlights the increasing sustainability of the environment as like a major driver for this.
Precisely. That sustainability angle seems absolutely key. It signals a real shift in farming practices worldwide as we look for, greener ways to grow things.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's probably good to remember the timeline here. The report uses 2024 as its base year.
Okay.
It pulls in historical data from 2021 through 2024, then estimates 2025, and forecasts out all the way to 2033, so it gives a pretty wide view.
Got it. That context is helpful. Okay, so where is all this cocoa peat being used? The regional breakdown is pretty revealing, isn't it? Starting with North America.
Yes, North America is currently the leader, holds over 40% of the global market share.
Wow, over 40%.
Yeah, the estimate for 2025 is around USD 981.06 million,
Okay.
which likely points to, mature market, established supply chains, people already knowing about soils growing.
Makes sense. But the growth rate there is a bit slower.
A bit more measured, yeah. The projected CAGR is 3.5% from 2025 to 2033.
And within North America?
The U.S. is the biggest chunk, USD 774.05 million, growing at about 3.3%. Canada is next at 117.73 million, but with a slightly higher growth rate, 4.3%.
Oh, interesting.
And Mexico's around 89.28 million, growing at 4.0%.
So what's driving it in North America? The report mentioned sustainable and organic trends in the U.S.
Exactly. That consumer demand is a big piece. And for Canada, it points towards the popularity of indoor horticulture, greenhouse growing, that sort of thing.
Right, which fits with maybe, climate or space considerations too.
Could be. It suggests a really established market for these alternative growing methods, driven both by what consumers want and what large-scale agriculture needs.
Okay. Moving across the pond, Europe is number 2.
That's right, holding over 30% of the market. Their 2025 estimate is USD 768.94 million.
And their growth rate.
A bit higher than North America's, actually, projected at 4.1% CAGR.
Okay.
And within Europe, there's some variation. The UK, for instance, is looking at USD 129.18 million and a pretty strong 4.9% growth rate.
Why so strong in the UK?
Seems to be driven by their horticulture and greenhouse sectors, quite active there.
Yeah.
Germany is the largest market in Europe, though. USD 152.25 million, growing at 4.3%, really pushing sustainable practices.
Okay.
Then you have France at about 70.74 million, 3.3% growth, and Russia at 119.18 million, growing a bit slower at 3.1%.
So it sounds like Europe, similar to the US maybe, is heavily influenced by that sustainability push. The report mentioned legislation.
Yeah, environmental laws and regulations definitely seem to be playing a big role, nudging things forward, alongside just a generally expanding horticulture industry.
Right, policy can be a powerful catalyst.
Definitely seems to be the case in Europe.
Okay, now let's talk about the region that's really taking off: Asia Pacific, APAC.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is where the growth story gets really dramatic. APAC holds around 23% of the market share now.
Okay, about a quarter.
Yeah, about USD 636.36 million in 2025. But the AGR projection is 7.7%.
7.7%. That's significantly higher than North America or Europe.
It really is. By quite a margin. It suggests a major shift happening in agriculture across that region. They're facing big pressures on land, on water.
So efficient methods like using cocoa peat become really attractive.
Exactly. China's a huge part of this USD, 267.27 million market size, growing at 7.2%. The report links this directly to the need for sustainable agriculture there.
And India.
India's market is smaller, about 63.64 million, but the growth rate is astounding, projected 9.6% CAGR.
Wow, nearly 10%.
Yeah, and they have the advantage of, well, lots of coconuts, abundant raw material, plus that push towards organic farming.
Make perfect sense.
And Japan, South Korea, Southeast Asia, they're all showing really strong growth too in the 6–8% range.
That massive growth in APAC, especially India and Southeast Asia, it really underlines this global move towards greener farming, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The report stresses that rapid agricultural expansion and just adopting sustainable techniques is key there. Plus, having the raw materials locally gives them a cost advantage too.
Good point. Okay, let's shift focus again. South America, smaller share, but still growing.
Yep, accounts for just over 5% of the global market. About USD 100.76 million in 2025.
And the growth rate.
Pretty solid at 5.7% AGR. Brazil's the main player, USD 43.12 million, growing at 6.3%. The report mentions their shift to sustainable agriculture and some government help there.
Okay.
Argentina is smaller, USD 16.93 million, but also has strong growth at 6.6%, apparently linked to more hydroponics use.
So even with a strong traditional farming background, they're embracing cocoa peat for sustainability, driven by maybe environmental factors or market demand.
What seems like a mix of both.
Yeah.
The report highlights how their agricultural heritage is now being supplemented by these newer sustainable methods.
Interesting. And then we have the Middle East and smaller shares currently.
Right. The Middle East is around 2%, USD 106.06 million in 2025, but with a pretty decent CAGR of 6.3%.
Higher growth than South America even.
Yeah. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are key. And you can see why cocoa peat would be appealing there, the dry climate, the need for water-saving strategies.
Makes perfect sense for soilless growing.
Exactly. Africa holds the smallest share, around 1%, about USD 58.33 million, growing at 5.3%. South Africa and Nigeria are mentioned.
What's driving it there?
In South Africa, the report points to government support for sustainable farming. In Nigeria, it seems to be more about a growing recognition of the benefits of organic mediums.
It's fascinating how those specific regional challenges like water scarcity in the Middle East really drive adoption, isn't it?
It really is. The local environmental and economic conditions definitely shape how the market develops in each place.
Okay, so that's the regional picture. The report also breaks the market down by the type of cocoa peat and how it's used. Let's dig into that.
Yeah, this part's interesting too. First, looking at type. It's segmented by EC, or electrical conductivity.
Right.
Low EC cocoa peat is the dominant type right now.
And why is that?
Mainly because its low salt content makes it super versatile, good for a whole range of plants, holds water well, good aeration, helps with nutrients, just a solid all-rounder.
Got it. The safe bet for general use. But the report said high EC is actually the fastest growing segment. That seems counterintuitive.
It does a bit, but it's driven by specific needs. Some agricultural situations, maybe where the water source is already a bit salty, can actually benefit from high EC peat.
Ah, okay.
And also advancements in hydroponics growing without soil, using nutrient solutions.
Right.
Some of those specialized systems are driving demand for high EC peat too.
I see. So low EC is the workhorse, but high EC is finding its niche and growing fast in specialized areas. Okay, what about how it's being used? The applications.
Well, no surprise. Agriculture and horticulture are the main applications currently. That's where cocoa peat's plant growing properties really shine. But the report flags bedding and flooring as the fastest growing application segments.
Bedding and flooring. Really? How does that work?
Yeah. It's kind of unexpected, but the growth comes from demand for more eco-friendly, sustainable materials like construction or home goods.
Ah, okay.
Cocoa peat is apparently quite good at absorbing moisture and controlling odors, so it works well for animal bedding, for example.
Huh. That's clever.
Yeah. And the report also mentions things like packaging and just others, showing it's finding uses beyond just growing plants.
So it's branching out into other eco-conscious products. That's really interesting. Okay, let's talk drivers. What's pushing this whole market forward?
Well, we've touched on some already. The increasing use of hydroponics and soilless farming is a big one.
Right, efficiency, land use.
Exactly. As good land gets scarcer and we need to grow food more efficiently, these methods and the substrates like cocoa peat they need become more important.
That definitely links back to the growth in places like Canada or the Middle East. What else?
The huge popularity of organic food. Consumers want it, and cocoa peat fits really well with organic farming methods.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Just the general increase in adoption, really. As more people and industries learn about it and use it, it just creates more opportunities and builds momentum. Awareness spreads.
The network effect, almost. Okay, so those are the tailwinds. What about the headwinds? What challenges or restraints does the market face?
The big one mentioned is the raw material supply, coconut husks. Their availability can fluctuate.
Ah, supply chain issues.
Yeah, and this is called out particularly for North America because they don't grow many coconuts locally,
Right,
so they rely on imports, which adds cost and complexity.
right. Relying on a single agricultural commodity can definitely be risky. What's the other main restraint?
It's more on the consumer side, a potential lack of clear understanding about quality.
Meaning?
Well, unlike, say, fertilizer with standard NPK numbers,
Mm.
cocoa peat quality isn't always easily standardized or communicated. So for a buyer, especially someone new to it, it can be hard to judge if they're getting good stuff.
Yeah, I can see that. If you're not sure what makes one bag better than another, it could make you hesitant. That quality transparency issue could slow things down.
Potentially, yeah, for some buyers.
Okay. Now, looking ahead, market trends. What's shaping the future here?
One clear trend is more government support. Programs promoting sustainable agriculture are popping up or expanding. The report mentioned this specifically for Europe, APAC, South America, Africa.
So, a pretty global trend of governments getting behind greener farming.
Seems like it. And that kind of policy support can really accelerate adoption.
Definitely. What's another key trend?
The rise of indoor farming and urban horticulture.
Yeah.
Think vertical farms, rooftop gardens.
Right. Growing food closer to where people live?
Exactly. As cities grow and people want local food, often grown in controlled environments, the demand for suitable media like cocoa peat goes up. We saw that mentioned for Canada and the Middle East earlier.
So, big policy shifts and also like grassroots urban trends are both pushing the market forward. Interesting mix. Okay, finally, the report touched on the competitive landscape. Any interesting company news?
Yeah, a couple of quick examples. Dutch Planten, back in January 2024, launched some new premium organic cocoa peat products
Premium how?
focused on better water retention and aeration, specifically targeted at hydroponics and organic growers. It shows companies are innovating, trying to improve the product for specific
Oh, yeah,
uses.
not just basic peat, but specialized versions.
No.
Suggest the market's maturing. What was the other example?
This one was cool. In December 2023, a new facility opened in India specifically to process tender coconut shells from municipal waste.
Wow, from waste.
Yeah, turning waste coconut shells into coir and cocoa peat. It's a great example of a local, sustainable solution, tackles waste, and meets the demand for peat.
That's fantastic, like a circular economy approach right there. Using waste streams, creating value, that's really encouraging.
Absolutely. It shows that innovation isn't just about the final product, but also about smarter, more sustainable sourcing and production.
Yeah, looking at the whole life cycle. Well,
Yeah.
this has been really illuminating, a proper deep dive into cocoa peat. Let's try and summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Okay, so in a nutshell, the global cocoa peat market is, well, it's already big and it's growing steadily. That growth is really being pushed by the global shift towards sustainable farming and also by finding new ways to use the stuff beyond just putting it in pots.
Right.
And we saw how different parts of the world have different growth speeds and reasons for using it, local farming needs, government rules, resource availability. It all plays a part.
And the segmentation, the low EC versus high EC, and the different applications like bedding, that shows how the market's evolving and creating new niches.
Exactly. It reveals these shifting demands and, new opportunities opening up.
So definitely more than just a simple gardening product. It's tied into these huge global trends, sustainability, how we grow food, international trade.
Precisely. It might seem niche, but it's playing a bigger and bigger role in that whole picture of environmental awareness and global commerce.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. We've heard about this rising demand, right? But also potential challenges with getting enough raw coconut husks. So, looking ahead, what kind of innovations or maybe even alternative materials might pop up, either within the cocoa peat industry itself or in related areas?
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
It really makes you think about how that push for sustainability and just basic market forces, supply and demand, how they'll keep interacting and driving what comes next. Something to keep an eye on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.